Have you ever felt that, like, that sense of opposition brewing? Maybe it's a quiet discomfort, or maybe it's a direct challenge to what you believe in, to how you live your life.
Yeah.
It's an experience, I think, that's pretty universal. We all face those moments where we feel like we're going against the grain.
Right.
So today, that's exactly what we're going to unpack. We're diving deep into those themes of opposition, the role that faith plays in helping us navigate it, and this really interesting idea of there being this, like, bigger timing at work. Maybe even, like, divine timing.
Yeah, that's right. To get into these ideas, we've got a collection of ancient texts today. They offer some pretty unique perspectives on all of this.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Lay it on me. What are we looking at?
Well, first we're going to be spending some time in the Gospel of John,
Okay.
specifically chapter 7.
Got it.
And then we'll move on to the Psalms,
Right.
and we'll be looking at chapters 27 and 34.
Nice.
And finally, we'll wrap things up with chapter 2 of the Wisdom of Solomon.
So we've got, like, narrative, poetry, reflective wisdom, all kind of centered around this idea of facing adversity.
Exactly.
And I think that's what I love about, approaching these topics through the lens of these ancient texts. They've got this way of speaking to those core human experiences that, they really transcend time and culture.
Right.
So as we go through these passages together, I think our mission, and what I'd love for you, our listener, to really consider, is how these texts might offer you insights into navigating your own challenges.
Yeah.
And maybe even recognizing that there's a larger purpose unfolding around you, even when things feel tough.
Absolutely.
All right, well, let's jump right in. Let's start unpacking this Gospel of John.
Okay, so chapter 7 of John, it kind of throws us right into a situation that's just thick with tension. We see Jesus in Galilee, and he's deliberately avoiding Judea.
Why is that?
Because, as the text tells us, there are people in Judea who are looking to kill him. So right from the get-go, this narrative, it's framed by opposition.
Oh, wow. Okay. So right off the bat, there are these very real threats to his safety.
Exactly. And then, to add another layer to all of this, we have the Feast of Tabernacles approaching. This was a huge religious observance for the Jewish people. And it's interesting to note that Jesus' brothers, they head to the feast publicly, but verse 10 tells us that Jesus, he goes later. And he goes privately, not out in the open.
Okay, so there's an element of, like, strategy here. It's not just, oh, I'm going to go to the feast. There's a sense of, I need to be careful about how I approach this.
Exactly. It suggests this deliberate choice to kind of avoid unnecessary confrontation, at least at that particular moment. And then when he does arrive in Jerusalem, the people's reactions, they're really fascinating. Some of them, they recognize the danger that he's in.
Like, they know what's going on.
Yeah, they're like, isn't this the man they're trying to kill?
Right.
And yet here he is speaking so openly and nobody's stopping him.
Yeah, so there's this sense of confusion, almost like, what's going on here? Why is he allowed to do this?
Right. They're wondering, have the authorities changed their minds? Or is there something else happening that we're just not getting?
Okay, that makes sense.
Okay.
And then a really specific objection comes up.
Yeah.
This has to do with Jesus' claim to be the Christ.
Exactly.
It's right there in verse 27.
And they say, we know where this man comes from, but when the Christ appears, no one will know where he comes from. And this, it seems like it's a huge stumbling block for a lot of people.
It is interesting, isn't it? Because you've got their very earthly understanding of his origins.
Right.
They know his family, they know where he's from.
Right.
But then you have this popular expectation of the Messiah coming in a way that's mysterious, unknown.
Exactly. They're basing their judgment on what they can see, on the tangible details of his life.
Yeah.
And because of that, they're dismissing his claim to be the Messiah.
And then Jesus' response is so direct.
It is.
He's speaking right there in the temple. And he says, you know me, and you know where I come from. But I haven't come on my own. He who sent me is true, and him you do not know. I know him, for I come from him, and he sent me. It's just like, boom, there it is.
It is. It's this powerful counter-argument.
Right.
He's challenging their assumptions about where he came from and about his authority. He's basically saying, you think you have me all figured out because you know these surface-level details about me, but you're missing the bigger picture. You don't know who really sent me.
And it's such a bold statement to make, especially considering the danger he's in.
It really is. And the immediate reaction is that they try to arrest him. Verse 30 tells us that.
Okay, here we go.
But they can't.
Why not?
Because his hour had not yet come.
Okay, let's unpack that phrase. His hour had not yet come.
It speaks so directly to this whole idea of divine timing, doesn't it? It really does. Even though he's facing all this opposition, even though there's this very real threat to his life, there's still this underlying sense that things are unfolding according to a bigger plan,
Yeah.
a schedule that's not just dictated by humans.
It suggests this deep trust in something beyond the current circumstances, doesn't it?
It does.
Like a reliance on a timing that's bigger than our human worries and anxiety.
Exactly. And I think that brings up a really important question for all of us. How often do we try to force things to happen on our own timeline?
Oh, yeah.
Or, get overwhelmed by fear and pressure when maybe there's a different timing at work, a larger timing that we just need to trust?
That's a huge takeaway. Like, sometimes it's about surrendering to that bigger picture.
Yeah.
Okay, now let's turn to Psalm 34. This one, to me, feels like such a direct response to those feelings of opposition and trouble that we've been talking about.
Yeah, I agree. Psalm 34 is often seen as the psalm of deliverance. It's like a cry for help that's answered by divine intervention.
It's comforting.
It is.
Okay, give me some highlights.
Well, you've got verse 17. When the righteous cry for help, the Lord hears and delivers them out of all their troubles. It's just this clear statement of faith in a God who listens and who acts on behalf of those who are striving to do what's right.
Yeah, it's not passive. This isn't a God who's just sitting back and watching. This is a God who's active and involved.
Exactly. And it goes on with these incredible words of comfort and reassurance. In verse 18, you have, the Lord is near to the brokenhearted and saves the crushed in spirit. And then verse 19, it really hits home. Many are the afflictions of the righteous, but the Lord delivers him out of them all. It doesn't sugarcoat things, does it? It doesn't promise you a life free from difficulty.
Right.
It's more like, hey, you're going to face challenges, but know this. I'm going to be with you through them all.
There's that sense of not being alone in the struggle.
Right. And then you have these incredibly vivid details in verses 20 and 21.
Okay, tell me about those.
So verse 20 says, he keeps all his bones, not one of them is broken. It's this powerful image of protection, of being kept safe and whole even in the midst of chaos. And then verse 21, it zooms out and offers this broader perspective on justice. It says, evil shall slay the wicked, and those who hate the righteous will be condemned.
So while the righteous might face suffering in the here and now, ultimately there's this sense that those who act unjustly will face consequences.
Except there's an accounting.
Yeah. And, when you think about the opposition that Jesus faced, this psalm offers this incredible sense of hope and vindication, even in the face of such intense hatred.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, let's move on to Psalm 27. The opening of this one is just, wow, so powerful, so confident.
It is. It says, the Lord is my light and my salvation. Whom shall I fear? The Lord is the stronghold of my life. Of whom shall I be afraid? It just emanates this unshakable trust and security.
Right. It's like, can you imagine facing your own challenges with that kind of bedrock faith?
It's incredible. And you can almost feel that same confidence in Jesus as we saw him in the gospel.
Yeah, you're right.
He knew the danger he was walking into in Jerusalem, but he still went. He still taught openly. It's as if he was living out that very verse, whom shall I fear?
Absolutely. He's not letting fear dictate his actions.
Exactly. And the reflection that often goes along with this psalm, it brings up a really interesting point.
Okay, what's that?
It talks about how the people failed to recognize Jesus' true origin.
They missed it.
They did. And I think it highlights that sometimes, even when something divine is right in front of us, our own limited perspectives or preconceived notions, they can blind us to it.
Oh, yeah, that's so true. We can get so caught up in what we think we know that we miss the bigger picture.
And this isn't just some historical observation, this applies to us today.
Right.
It's about our own struggles to recognize God's presence in our everyday lives.
Yeah.
It's like a call to be more open, more aware of the subtle ways that the divine might be showing up that we're just overlooking.
I love that. So it's not always these grand, dramatic events. It's about tuning in to the quieter moments, the everyday miracles.
Exactly. And that raises a question for all of us. How often are we looking for God in the big, flashy things and missing those quieter, subtler ways that a greater power might be working in our lives?
That's a good one to sit with.
Yeah.
Okay, what else does this reflection emphasize?
Oh, it really highlights the importance of trusting in that perfect timing we were talking about earlier.
Okay.
And it encourages us to act boldly on what we believe is right, even when the path ahead seems uncertain, even when it feels scary.
Yeah, it's about that leap of faith, isn't it?
It is, and there's often a prayer that follows this reflection that just resonates with these incredible themes.
Okay, I'm listening.
It's a prayer for courage to face whatever comes our way, for a clear recognition of God's presence in our lives, and for the strength to follow our convictions without being paralyzed by fear.
That's beautiful.
And then there's this question that's posed. How can you trust God's timing more and follow his will with confidence today?
It's like a direct invitation to really look inward, isn't it?
It is. It bridges the gap between these ancient words and our lives right now. It invites us to think about how these themes are playing out in our own experiences.
All right, let's shift gears a little bit and turn to the Wisdom of Solomon, chapter 2. This one takes us into some pretty interesting territory.
It does. It offers this fascinating and maybe a little unsettling look into the minds of those who actively oppose those who are trying to live righteously.
Okay, I'm curious. Tell me more.
Well, verses 12 through 16, they're particularly insightful. They detail this really negative, often distorted perception that these people have of someone who's trying to live a different way.
So they see someone who's striving to do what's right, and their reaction is negative.
Yeah, it's like this righteous person becomes this inconvenience to them, someone who's constantly opposing our actions, as the text says.
They feel judged, even threatened, by this person's very existence.
Exactly. And it's interesting because the text highlights how the righteous person's connection to a higher power, their claim of knowing God, of calling themselves a child of the Lord, it really gets under their skin.
It's like that connection becomes a source of irritation, of resentment.
It does. It's as if the very presence of this righteous person is holding up a mirror to their own flaws, their own wrongdoing. And they hate that reflection.
Yeah, it makes them uncomfortable because it challenges their own way of life.
Exactly. And that discomfort, that negative perception, it fuels this desire to test the righteous person. We see that unfold in verses 17 through 20.
How so?
Well, they want to see if the righteous person's claims are actually true. They want to see what their life is going to be like in the end. There's this twisted logic that if this person really does have divine favor, then God will step in and rescue them from any suffering they endure.
It's like a challenge almost.
It is. It's like, let's put their faith to the test. Let's see if this God they talk about is real and will actually protect them.
So there's this element of wanting to prove them wrong, wanting to expose them as a fraud.
Exactly. And they decide to test him with insult and torture, as the text says, to see how he'll react. And ultimately, they decide to condemn him to a shameful death, specifically because he keeps saying that he has God's protection.
Wow. So they're using his faith, his trust in God, as justification for their actions.
Yeah, it's pretty messed up. And the narrator's assessment of their reasoning, it's just so spot on. In verses 21 and 22, it says, "Thus they reasoned, but they were led astray, for their wickedness blinded them. They were missing this deeper understanding of divine purposes, the hope that comes with holiness, and the ultimate reward that awaits those who live blamelessly."
And, you can't help but see the parallels between this and the opposition that Jesus faced.
Right.
The misunderstandings, the accusations, the desire to test him, and ultimately the unjust condemnation.
It's all there, and it underscores this pattern that we see throughout these texts, doesn't it? The righteous person is misunderstood, marginalized, treated unfairly. It's a theme that repeats itself across centuries.
It's timeless. So if we were to sum up the key themes that we've explored today, what would you say they are?
Well, I think the biggest one is that thread of opposition that runs through all of these texts. We see the questioning of identity, especially in the gospel.
Right.
And then there's this emphasis on trusting in a larger timing,
Yeah.
which we see in the gospel and in the Psalms. We also look at the nature of righteousness and, maybe most unsettling, the flawed logic of those who reject it.
And it's fascinating how each of these texts offers a different angle on these ideas.
It is.
The gospel gives us that ground-level view of conflict. The Psalms offer solace and reassurance, a sense that there's justice in the midst of suffering.
Right.
The reflection challenges us to apply these ancient truths to our own lives.
Absolutely.
And the Wisdom of Solomon gives us this almost psychological analysis of what motivates those who stand in opposition.
Yeah, it's like a deep dive into the heart of opposition. But woven through all of it, there's this message of hope.
Right.
This importance of placing your trust in something bigger than yourself.
It's a powerful reminder. So as we wrap things up today, I think the central insight that emerges is this. Facing opposition is just part of the deal when you choose to live according to your deepest convictions.
It is.
And these texts, they offer us this timeless message of trusting in a power that's beyond our current circumstances. Whether we call it divine timing, the Lord's support, the ultimate triumph of good over evil, it's about holding on to that faith when things get tough.
And as you go about your day, I want to challenge you to think about not just the external opposition you might encounter, but also the internal resistance you face.
Okay, yeah. What do you mean by that?
Well, you know, those doubts and fears that we all have, those things that can hold us back from living authentically or pursuing what we know is right.
Yeah, the internal battles.
Exactly. And how might those same principles of faith and trust that we've been talking about, how might they also apply to those internal struggles? It's something to consider.
That's such a good point, because sometimes the biggest opposition we face comes from within.
It does.
Well, on that note, we encourage you to spend some time reflecting on what we've discussed today.
Yeah.
Let these ancient words sink in. See how they resonate with your own experiences.
And think about how these insights might offer new perspectives on the challenges you're facing right now.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.